Hello and welcome to Talking Books. I'm Jill de Villiers. The South African political landscape has changed dramatically since Jacob Zuma stepped down as president. Now, what can we expect from next year's elections? Joining me now is veteran political journalist Jan-Jan Joubert, who explores all the possible scenarios in his book, Who Will Rule in 2019? Welcome, Jan-Jan.
Thanks, Jill. Such a pleasure to be here.
Let's go forward to 2019. Is this going to be the first time since the 1994 elections that we're not going to have an outright majority?
Jill, it very well might be. And that's not just my feeling, it's borne out by the figures. During the period 2014 to 2016, we saw a precipitous drop in the support for the ANC. They fell from 62% to 53%, which was a 9 percentage point drop. That is the largest percentage point drop since the advent of parliamentary politics in South Africa in 1910. So therefore, since then, there's been 118 by-elections with an average drop for the ANC of 7.4%. This means that there's a definite chance, all other things being equal, that the ANC may drop under 50% for the first time since 1994.
Now this week, in two wards in the Cape, the ANC gained. Do you think that this is maybe a new trend that is being set in, or don't you think that might influence it?
Look, it's very interesting. What we are seeing is that the DA is basically asking itself to be self-destructing. What we are seeing in the Western Cape, those two wards, one was in Oudtshoorn and one was in Saldanha Bay, there was a swing of 10% and 17% against the DA. Whether it's really towards the ANC remains to be seen. But of course, you raise a very important point, which is that in a proportional representation system like ours, that is important because every vote is equal. Were the DA to mess it up, as they are in the Western Cape at the moment, yes, it could help the ANC, if only relatively. However, the Western Cape is one province. Look at what's happening in KZN, where the IFP is doing a Lazarus on us. It is it's a rising from the dead, really. And we saw that in Tuba last week, where they took another ward off the ANC, and we keep seeing it within the KZN area. So, yes, were the ANC to drop below 50%, it's not only up to the ANC, it's also up to the opposition parties, especially the two largest ones, the EFF and the DA. They have to get their vote out if they want the ANC to drop below 50%. At this stage, the DA is not doing that.
Now, another thing that happened this week, as well as there's this talk about a new party being formed, a Zuma supporting party. How do you think that would influence things?
I don't think it would have as much influence as the talk would suggest at this stage, because such a Zuma party does not seem to have any policies except that it wants to keep the former president out of prison and out of court. I cannot imagine voters in their masses really voting for something like that, which has no impact on the average life of the average voter.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we look at your book, the methodology that you use to come to your conclusions, please explain that methodology.
The methodology is key, because too much analysis in South African politics is actually, it seems as though it's like the feelings of the person and the few people the person speaks to. That's no way to do political analysis in South Africa. In South Africa, there's a growing corpus of figures from the IEC which shows you the voting patterns in our country. In 2016, it was quite easy, and I did it, to call the election early and all these coalition governments which surprised people. So what you have to do is to take into account the registration numbers, the voting history of the ward, and then you calibrate it in that way, and you get to some sort of prediction for the election as it will happen. It might not be a prediction, but it is a projection which might work very well and which made a lot of money for some friends of mine who used my figures.
Now, if you look at coalitions are not easy things. We could see that in Nelson Mandela Bay, for example. How do you think coalitions will then evolve in 2019?
Yes, coalitions are dysfunctional, loveless marriages at best. So it's nobody's idea of the perfect political marriage. However, in the end, politics is the art of the possible. And the great cue to take is from the American President Bill Clinton, who said, compared to what? That is the position of the EFF, and were the ANC to drop below 50%, look, if they're above 50%, they decide what happens. But this is a time when there's a possibility that they do drop below 50%. In such a case, it will be very important what the EFF does. Now, the EFF was faced with the same choice in 2016. It was a tough choice for them. In the end, they went with the opposition. They might go with the governing party this time. The thing that you see with the EFF is that policies are key to them. Not so much personal relationships or power play, more policies. And I think anyone who wants to potentially partner the EFF needs to take cognizance of that and needs to take policy discussions and early policy discussions into account.
Now, if we look at Ramaphosa, do you think that that things will change with him there if he does more change in terms of fighting corruption? He might not retain enough support within his own party.
Mr. Ramaphosa is faced with the Hobson's choice every politician faces, which is to balance out possibilities. If he were to not act against corruption, the opposition voters will continue going against the ANC and it will continue losing support. Were he to do too much in favor of fighting corruption, he might within his party stumble onto a position where many powerful people in the ANC might end up in very difficult positions because they are so compromised. For instance, we have seen the start of the investigations into corruption and maladministration in the Free State, Northwest as well. When are we getting to Mpumalanga? That is going to be much tougher. Ace Magashule of the Free State and Supra Mahomapelo of Northwest were his enemies. They were easy to act against. They were easy to investigate. David Mabuza is the man whom he owes. He's the man whom he can thank for coming to power in the first place. Will he be pursuing the investigation into maladministration in Mpumalanga with the same vigor that he is showing in Northwest and the Free State?
Now, the other issue is crime. So standing up and fighting against crime, that may gain him some votes. On the other hand.
Yes, and I think the ANC has become firmer on crime. The appointment of Becky Cele as Minister of Police has certainly added in that way, and I think that will help the ANC in the next election.
Mm-hmm. Now, also this week we had the Charlotte Maxeke Hospital, and the Minister of Health came out quite strongly against what was happening there. This sort of hardline approach by the government, how do you think that will be received by the public?
I think it will be received very well by the populace. Of course, the Charlotte Maxeke situation is not the first one. The first department of Northwest to be put under administration was the Health Department. Dr. Motsoaledi, the Minister of Health, is known for taking a hard line and being on the side of the patient, and therefore I think that will also work in the ANC's favour.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Zupta affair, how much damage do you think that did to the ANC?
Well, we will see in the election. I think it did huge damage. Mm-hmm. But as I said before, it's not just a matter of the ANC doing itself damage. The opposition parties must also be able to take advantage of the situation. That is where the IFP have been very good with their message of trust us. Mm-hmm. And we can see it in KZN where the average swing against the ANC in rural areas since Mr. Zuma resigned has been 13%, 1-3. That's very high.
Mm. Do you think there may be a dark horse?
I don't think so at the moment, because I do not believe that there is space really. I think it's a crowded field. I cannot imagine what ideological space there is for a new party to really run. We are seeing the new Zuma party. As I said, I don't really know what they're going to run on except to try and keep people who are suspected of corruption out of jail, and I cannot see what the voter would gain. The far left is taken up by the EFF, which is fighting that corner very, very firmly. maybe even too loudly. I think that the liberal corner is taken up, the free market corner. I think the feudal traditionalist corner is taken up by the IFP, and the centre is taken up by the ANC, which is just shooting itself in the foot with maladministration. But ideologically, I think they're on a good wicket.
But the EFF, do you think that they stand a good chance of gaining a greater...
I do think so. I mean, I think they underperformed in 2014 when they had no one in the field and no money. They got 6%. Then they grew up to 8%, which is a 2 percentage point growth, but that's actually 1/3 improvement from 6%. And now they have councillors in the field who can campaign for them. They have a bit of money in the kitty. If they don't end up with infighting like the DA does, I think the EFF could do quite well.
Do you think that Mr. Ramaphosa might have something up his sleeve that we don't know anything about yet?
Well, in the book I try to unveil some of it, and it hasn't been taken to task yet. It's a kite which I think they are flying, which is to bring back a government of national unity irrespective of the election result, to invite the opposition parties into an ANC-dominated government. I think it's very smart thinking on the side of the ANC, because it will divide the opposition parties amongst themselves and between each other, and also it will take the edge off the ANC to some extent, where people will say that the malfeasance within the ANC can be countered by the influence of corruption, of opposition figures who are anti-corruption.
The ideal outcome of the election, how would you characterize that?
Well, I think there are about 26 million ideal outcomes to the election. It depends on you as a voter, and the most important thing to realize that outcome for you as a voter is to go out and vote. In the end, that result will depend on the voters of the country.
Jan-Jan, thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us.
Thank you, Jill. It's been such a pleasure.
So that was Jan-Jan Joubert, and his book is Who Will Rule in 2019. Thank you for watching. Until next time.